Hi, all. I'm Catherine Rose, CEO and founder of GetWise. GetWise provides on demand expert advice to help small businesses, entrepreneurs, and professionals accelerate their business or career growth. Our nearly 1,000 experts from around the world provide affordable one on one advice that helps folks go farther faster in their business or career. Today, we have with us Dr. Froswa Booker-Drew. She is a GetWise expert and the president of Solstice Consulting, specializing in leadership development, philanthropic advisement, and community engagement. She's also the author of 4 books, including the recently published Empower Charity, a new narrative for philanthropy. Thank you so much, Froswa, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. I'm excited to be here.
And tell us a little bit about you and your journey to leadership development. I know you speak a lot about, leadership and empathy and those kinds of things. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
I never saw myself as a leader. I think as most women, I think you find yourself in these positions where you look up and go, oh, wow, people are actually following me. And, so my journey was really starting as a student leader at the University of Texas at Arlington. I ran for office on campus, not thinking about the responsibility. And just throughout my career, it's been this evolving. And I think that's the case for most leaders, that you have to know that what you have in your head is going to change because of the experiences of the people that you work with, the environment of the organization. And so leadership has been this constant thread throughout my life, where it's not just making sure that people are understanding the vision. To me, it's about a both and, not just getting the vision of where we want the organization to go, but it's about how do I also make sure that I'm stewarding and growing these people well to be the best of whoever they're called to be.
I think that's so important that you look at it as an evolution, right?
Yes.
And not just, leader is somebody who people just follow, or you bark orders, or, you kind of make the decisions and people follow. But, one of the things I wanted to ask is, in your experience, how have you seen leadership evolve over the years? Because I know when I first started my career many years ago, it was more like that. Like, I am the leader and you follow me. And there wasn't a whole lot of room for suggestions or discussion or any of that kind of stuff. So how have you seen leadership kind of evolve over the years? And what do you see as the most beneficial thing to that evolution?
I saw the exact same thing. But what I realized was that doesn't work, because people are more prone to just doing the bare minimum and what's required than actually having a sense of ownership for the work. And so what I learned was, when you do that kind of authoritative leadership style, yeah, things will get done, but at any opportunity or time that folks get to sabotage your work, they are waiting on it because they don't feel connected to you. And so I learned over the years that works when you have to be in a disaster situation where there is crisis and we've got to make a decision immediately. And you don't have the time for consensus. But hopefully you've built the trust in your team where they trust your decisions, even if they haven't been included in the process of buy-in. And so for me, because I recognize that relationships are the key to anything that you want to happen, leadership requires relationship. And so, it's not that you're trying to become your staff's therapist and you're doing kumbaya with them and holding hands. I'm not suggesting that that's what you do. If it works, great. But what it does require is being in tune and knowing what your staff's need may be in order to be successful at the job. And it requires creating this two-way relationship where it's not me just talking and barking orders. It really is about, how do I make sure that they're successful? And in doing that, I've got to listen and create the space for them to feel comfortable to do that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. You mentioned about the relationship, but I also think it's important you mentioned that kumbaya thing, because I speak a lot at a lot of events and I hear leadership speakers, and I can kind of see, out of the corner of my eye, a lot of the leaders who, have probably grew up as I did with that authoritative kind of leadership, and they feel like it's soft, right? And that we have to coddle these people and, oh, kids today and that kind of stuff. And I think what I'm hearing you say is it's not about that. It's about making sure that you're reaching into your team and getting the feedback and including them in decisions to, to a point that you can include them in the decisions, and maybe really listening to what they have to say versus, like you said, being their therapist,
Yeah. And what we don't realize is that we have blind spots. I mean, think about it in your car. Without having a mirror, you can't see what's on the side of you. Your staff can serve as a mirror because they have perspectives and unique life and lived experiences that if you shut down the communication process, you're actually blocking your ability to really grow and have those perspectives speak into the way that you do the work. And we miss things. That's why we have teams.
Right. And I think too, obviously, the generation that's entering the workforce, it is a different world. Even with my kids, I mean, my son's 14 and I watch his teachers and how they interact with the students, totally different.
Yes.
I mean, when I was in school, it was like, here's your homework, have a nice day. You know what I mean? Like, good luck to you.
Exactly. But you have to keep in mind that with all the generational differences in the workplace, there are different things that have shaped us. And for you and I, it sounds like we grew up, right when MTV was coming along and technology was really beginning to be birthed. And I think for a lot of young folks, we have to realize they've always had this stuff. I didn't have Starbucks. I had community coffee and Maxwell House. Pick one. You know what I mean? And now you've got espresso and latte and all these things. This is a generation that has choices, and the workplace has to be aware that they see life very differently because of the way that they are shaped, just like boomers and, Gen X also shaped very differently. And we got to figure out how to work this out and work through it. So what worked for us may not work for them.
Well, and of course, we see, especially in the technology sector where I am, but in others, there's such a gap of talent. And in order to bring that, we're going to have to bring new folks in or reskill some of the folks that are already in. And in order to do that, we need to be more collaborative. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Oh, yes. I was doing a training for a group and talking about this idea of what is collaborative and collective leadership, and really thinking about how leaders show up and create those spaces where teams feel that they can be authentic and share their expertise without feeling like, I don't know if this is the place to do that. A collaborative environment really says that I want you to bring the totality of who you are to this space.
Yeah.
And let's use that to make a great product, to sell things that really can impact people's lives. But it's going to have to change from, what we started with originally, this authoritative way of doing things. It doesn't work in the world that we're in. And now that we're more global than we were, 30 years ago, it's forcing us to think very differently about the ways that we engage people in the workplace.
Well, and also too, you mentioned this space, right? So it wasn't only the authoritarian, regime, so to speak, your teams, but it was also you had authority over the space or where people worked. So you had, these people were in the office. It's not like that anymore.
Oh.
So maybe give some tips on, because a lot of companies are pushing for even hybrid work, and their workers are pushing back. So if you're going to be creating this collaborative, leadership environment, how do you do it at a distance?
Well, first, trust your people. It amazes me that we hire people and then we go, I don't know if I trust you. And I'm like, and they've been working there for 5 years or 7 years and you don't trust them. You obviously voted for them and giving them the opportunity. So start with that. Until they prove you otherwise wrong, we have to begin to believe that our people are competent and are proficient at the work that they do. And so create space for check-ins. It's going to be important to have the dialogue. It's not just about let's get to doing the work, but I need to know how you're feeling. And I don't think enough employers create spaces for people. Again, I'm not suggesting that you have an hour therapy session every day, for lunch. But what I am saying is before your meetings and status, how do you create space to have bonding where people are
Right.
getting to know each other? And then how are you also creating these spaces, as I call it, for cross pollination, where teams are actually able to work on projects together and share their expertise? It's going to be so important for leaders to be intentional and deliberate about creating these safe spaces for their employees to connect to each other and build those relationships so that when one isn't flying in the V formation, as we see birds are doing, that those birds actually drop down and stay with the other until they're well, and then they all come back and lift each other up. The same thing can apply to humans, just as birds have done that. We can do it where we can support each other to do great work, but we got to create the space for that.
Fantastic. And I mean, I know I saw that your doctorate focused on, on social capital. So what does that mean and why is it important?
I had no idea what it was until one of my advisors said, "You're intrigued with this relationship thing. You love it." And I thought I was going to do something else. And the more I learned about social capital, it really is about networks, associations. It's the core of it is trust. And all of us have relationships. I think where we miss the mark is we don't see our relationships as a form of currency. And I don't mean that in a negative way where we're looking at everybody and going $50 on that one. You're 1,000. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that you should label your folks in this monetary amount, but it is thinking about the power of our networks. And so social capital really was brought to the forefront by this amazing scholar in 2000 who wrote Bowling Alone. And I love this man's work because, and it'll hit me in a minute who he is. I can see the book. And Robert Putnam. And Putnam's work really helped people think about, at one time, we used to have dinner parties. We don't do that as much anymore. Or people used to bowl together. And it's important that we start being, again, intentional about the networks that we build because it helps us with information. And companies, it helps with recruiting because if you continue to get the same homogeneous population, you're going to get the same homogeneous information. And so that's why social capital is so important, is it really can help us change, not only our lives, but the way our companies look, because we're really thinking about who's missing.
So I think that I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit more. So when you're looking, I think what you're saying is when you're looking at your either social sphere or your company, the important thing is to not look at who is there, but who isn't.
Yes, yes. And as we have these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, social capital is really a great tool because how do you start tapping into the networks of the people that work for you? So when people tell me I can't find certain employees, I'm like, what are you talking about? Maybe it's your network that you need to pay attention to. And so there are two types of social capital. There's bonding and bridging. And bonding is connecting to people that are just like us. That's easy. Nothing wrong with it. But how do we begin to start doing this idea of bridging, connecting to people that are different, whether it's ideology or gender or sexuality or race, whatever the identity may be? It's an opportunity to start looking at who's missing, not to check a box and go, oh, I have one of those.
Yeah.
But it's to be able to say, and having these unique lived experiences helps me in the marketplace play at a very different level than most when they're homogeneous.
So how do you really look at creating these bridging ties? So say I'm a company and most of my employees are white men, and I know because I've seen that the research that, more diverse, companies do better in the long run. And I hear a lot of this stuff, but I don't know how to even start. Like, what would your recommendation be there?
So I think it's thinking about pipelines of talent that you can create. So is there a historically Black university or a Hispanic serving institution that's in your community? How can you begin to build a pipeline of having interns that can work at your company through those kinds of relationships? Can you join professional associations that are, identity based? And so is there, a gay lesbian organization that's doing work and community and it's an affinity group? How can you partner with that professional association? So it's really thinking about What are groups that are in your community? And it makes you do what's called asset mapping, where you got to start looking at what are the associations, the institutions, the individuals that are missing from your work. And see, this is the thing. I don't care what community you live in, those assets are there. So there are opportunities, even now virtually, where you could connect to the, National Black Association of Journalists if you're, needing to bring on a writer for your work. How do you start partnering with those kind of affinity organizations? Those are the places where you can begin, and they exist.
And I think what I'm hearing you say too is it's intentional, right? You have to be
Yes.
intentional about it. It's not like a diverse person is just going to show up on your front doorstep and say, pick me. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you have to be intentional about the reach out. And yeah, I think in some ways too, you also have to be open to it. You have to be open to that social capital and those affinity groups and making sure that you have representation, right?
Because it matters. And if we're going to have very strong companies that are competitive, we've got to bring in people with very different lived and life experiences and identities to do that.
Well, I mean, we talked a lot about leadership, but what if you are a member of a team and you're having some challenges? Like, what are some advice that you can give to maybe some of the folks that are listening who maybe, they're having challenges being part of a team?
I think it's going to require building relationships. So how do you pull one by one those people on the team and get to know them? Are there challenges that they possibly are facing, but they may vocalize it in a way that you may not do? And so and it's not to go and create this situation where, are they treating you crazy? Because you know what I mean? And starting to gossip, that's not it either. But it's beginning to build the relationship so that you have advocates for yourself. And I think so often we focus on the work that we don't realize that there are people that are behind the work. Build relationships, get the trust where they can become advocates for you. And then if there's an opportunity for growth where you see that maybe there's something that you can improve upon, what is the opportunity for you as an employee? Not to just think about it for the job, but how do you make sure that every day you are the best reflection of you with the people you're working with? You're your best self. So are there opportunities to invest in professional development? Like all the things that you all do with Ask the Expert, are there other opportunities that they can tap into to build their social capital, to build their knowledge base so that they can be the best employee ever?
I also think sometimes that what we don't realize is that people don't always see, your leaders may not always see the challenges that you're facing. And I think that there are some times where employees, they need to understand that they can bring things forward too. That it's not just a situation where somebody doesn't want to see you or understand, but especially in a remote work environment, like I don't know that, before we had this call, my daughter forgot her homework. I had to run and get that. And my dog is barking and like all these crazy things. Yes. And you know what I mean? And so, but folks might not see that, right? When you're doing the work, and they may be, well, why did you miss that? Why were you a few minutes later? Why did you miss that appointment? And we're not comfortable saying, well, it's because of all these crazy things, but everybody has them, right?
But that's relationship that comes in that says, I know Catherine well enough to know that Catherine has a dog and she's got kids and all these things that are going on. And so I can extend grace to her because I know Catherine is going to show up and do the work that I need to be done. So it's also important that's why the check-ins are so important, so that you learn your people and understand, on Mondays, it's not a good day for her because X happens. So we really have to take the time to get to learn our people, and that when they do bring issues to us, leaders can't be defensive and think it's an attack on you. It's a real opportunity for you to lean in and work collaboratively with that person to make it better.
I think that's just so important. And I'm hoping that the folks that are listening are really going to take it to heart, because it is so important. If you want to have successful teams, that you need to create this collaborative, diverse, diversity inclusion environment for your teams and for your business for the future. So thank you so much for being with us today. And I just want to get some top tips or, some last words that you have for the audience on, building social capital or building collaborative environments.
I think number one, your LinkedIn network, how do you leverage that? I think people miss opportunities. They're so interested in having 1,000 or 10,000 followers that they're not leveraging those relationships. So, how do you have virtual coffees? What does that look like once a month to meet someone new so that you can build your network and learn from them? All of us need mentors, sponsors, and coaches. So, you got to have the cheerleader who's going, great job, Froswa, but you also need the person who's giving you the wisdom and life experience. You need a personal board of directors. And so every leader and employee, whatever station you are in life, you need a personal board of directors. You need people that can speak into your life and give you the wisdom and tell you when you might think that's working well, but we're looking at you and that's not going to cut it. And so it's important that as leaders, we surround ourselves with this safety net of people who can see things that we don't always see because of our blinders, and getting that network through your LinkedIn and having that virtual coffee, building that board of directors, getting sponsors, people who say your name behind closed doors. We all need more of those people in our lives. Be intentional in your workplace and identifying who can do that for you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Froswa. Really appreciate having you here today. And of course, being an expert on GetWise, very much appreciate that as well. And if you have any other questions, we're going to put Dr. Booker-Drew's information into the chat, into the post, so you can schedule some time with her if you have some more questions on this. And if you have any other challenging questions for your business or your career, feel free to join us on getwiseconnect.com. Thanks again, Froswa, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.